Okay, today on Lifestyle Medicine, we've got Tony Galis, who's a licensed acupuncturist and herbalist. And where are you out of? Where are you hailing from
I'm
nowadays?
in Athens, Georgia.
Athens, Georgia. And you grew up in that area, correct?
Yeah, I actually grew up in Athens and then was gone for 20 years. And
Cool.
yeah, you know what they say.
Right. Hard to get away from home, man. Very
I know
hard.
it's true. Yeah.
Well, for the people listening, Tony and I went to the same acupuncture grad school in Santa Cruz, California at Five Branches University. And I think I was coming in as you were leaving, maybe.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that was kind
Yeah.
of,
We were supposed to be out in 2009, I believe, but somehow a baby came into our lives.
right.
A stork dropped a baby off on our doorstep.
Right.
So we didn't get out of there till 2010. But I don't remember what year you came in. You were pretty close to.
Yeah, I came in 2008, but that first semester that I was there, I was actually taking all my prereqs at Cabrillo, the community
Oh,
college.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
wasn't really there until like the following semester, like the fall
yeah,
of whatever that following semester. So I think we got a year's time together, more or less,
yeah,
give or
yeah,
take. And then
yeah,
I crossed paths with you originally. I think you were teaching one of Lee Holden's Qigong classes.
yeah,
You were a sub or something like that
yeah,
for,
yeah. I taught a lot of his classes, because he was traveling tons, and that was
yeah,
great. It was an awesome opportunity to
for sure.
um, interact at Five Branches in a different way and teach at his classes too at the Chi Center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tony, will you give the audience kind of like a rundown? Like I just said, you're an acupuncturist and herbalist, but can you kind of give a backdrop just to, yeah, how you found Chinese medicine, what you're doing now? Because I've had a number of Chinese medicine people on here, but the cool part about Chinese medicine is that we all kind of engage it a little bit differently.
Yeah,
Common
that's right.
threads, but we all sort of have our own thing with it, our own relationship. So I'd love to hear that from your
Mine.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I came to the Chinese arts in general through an interesting path, and though not probably unique. When I was in college the first time, when I left high school, I went to college for a couple of years. I didn't last that long in college because I wanted to get out and experience the world. I was done sitting in a desk.
Yeah.
But I was a religious studies major and had a focus on Native American spiritual traditions and studied some Eastern stuff too, so Daoism, Buddhism. So that was really my passion, was coming from the spiritual side originally. Like I said, I left school because academics wasn't agreeing with me anymore.
Hmm.
I went on a bit of a walkabout. I sort of lived on the road for a while, hitchhiking and riding freight trains and spending lots of time in the woods and living
Yeah.
out of a backpack. And then, continuing to study these traditions, but from a more experiential perspective, right? So seeking out teachers, continuing my own studies and trying to live a lifestyle that was in alignment with the basic principles that I was sort of finding that were common to many of these traditions.
Yep.
And at some point along the way, I don't even remember what it was, that I just had this desire, or this knowing inside that somehow I needed to study this Tai Chi thing.
Hmm.
It was this. I didn't really know anything about it. I'd seen it a few times, and it had always impressed me, but it was really something beyond me. It was just like, you need to go check this out, and so I did. I went into it not really knowing anything about it,
Hmm.
and that really changed the course of my. It altered my path quite strongly, because I really fell in love with that art and spent the next, really 6 or 7 years. That was full commitment to studying Taiji.
Yep. And just
And
as a real side quick question there,
yeah,
how old were you when you started official Tai Chi practice?
that's a great question. I was, I guess, in my early 20s, maybe 24, 23, 24, something like that.
Got it.
Yeah. Which, of course, traditionally be incredibly late to begin a practice like that.
Totally, man. I started at 21 and they were like, you're behind the curve. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. What are we to do, though, right?
right, right.
Hopefully the next generation will be better off because
Right,
we're
right.
here. Yeah. So anyway, committed my life to that. Was training tons, and and then eventually sort of tried to figure out, well, how how do I truly revolve my whole life around this going forward and make this a sustainable path? Because I kind of felt split between my studies of Taiji and the Chinese arts and work, trying to make a living at the time.
For sure.
And you know how it is with the Chinese arts, kind of once you get in underneath the surface level, you start to spread out. Those philosophical underpinnings lead you to other arts that are based on the same philosophical underpinnings. Discovered Chinese medicine at some point, along with lots of other arts, and got sort of figured at some point, like, this is my ticket. Chinese medicine will be my ticket.
Yep.
And this will help me round out my understanding of this cosmology, this way of understanding the universe.
Sure.
And give me a career that will help me, that will sort of anchor all of my passions around it.
Yeah.
So I went to Chinese medical school, and somewhere in the first couple of weeks of Chinese medicine school, somebody asked the question in a class, why did you come here? And I was never like, I'd studied healing traditions, but I didn't have any designs to be a healer.
Right.
My answer to the question was, I want to understand the nature of the universe.
Yeah. Go big or go home.
Yeah, exactly. Like, let's do this. Let's go all the way. So that was it, man. I went in and, of course, what I thought Chinese medicine was, and what I thought it would mean to me changed dramatically over the years, and it continues to shift and change. Mm-hmm. And my perspective on all these arts is incredibly, phenomenally more grounded now than it ever was before, right? We all start from this idealistic place.
Oh yeah.
And then we take our hits and learn some things, and we learn where the boundaries are, where the edges are. We learn truly actionable ways to push those boundaries and edges. But what I think we all learn at some point is that what we think the potential is not what the potential is, and we have to kind of become tempered in the arts as we go.
Yeah, agreed fully. Well, thank you for the overview. No, and there's some cool threads in there, because it's similar to what, I mean, we have similar interests, obviously, in the way we've approached, Chinese medicine, but there were some similar threads there, like academia. I mean, I finished college, but it wasn't, like academia just was never really my thing. So to go back to grad school was kind of like, oh, fuck, here we go again. Like, I'm going to do this. That's going to be rough. But, what you said, you found Chinese medicine sort of through martial arts. It was like that was your introduction. And it was the same way for me. And I didn't even know, I mean, I was so green. I just didn't know that Tai Chi was a part of Chinese medicine. Like, I thought Chinese medicine was its isolated acupuncture and herbs by itself. And then the martial arts were like a completely separate part of the culture. It didn't even dawn on me that they linked. And I think that was the hook. And it was, I fell into Chinese medicine. I moved to Santa Cruz at the time, was in love with a girl, followed her there. And I got there and I started training with the Tung Shidao people, who I didn't know were Tung Shidao, martial artists. And they all trained like 4 hours a day. And I was like, you guys are like machines, but you're all high energy. So what's the deal? Yeah. What is this? And they said, oh, we're all acupuncture students at 5 branches. Yeah. And I was like, that's great, but what the hell does that have to do with this? Yeah. It was I still didn't get it. And they said, well, it's like yin and yang. It's the yin healing arts and the active yang destructive martial arts. They sort of, they're two pieces in there, but they're ultimately one and the same thing. And if you do one, it makes the other better. And it was just that dawning moment where I said, so you guys just do kung fu and heal people? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, I'm going to quit my job and go start doing that. But it was the same kind of thing. I mean, it fell into it. Have you seen, you're familiar with Jeffrey Yuen?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So one of the things he said, and I like what you just said, was he said, there's knowledge and education, and then there's a living medicine traditions. And he said there's kind of a difference. Like you can memorize information like in the West about drugs and their actions. He said, but a living medicine tradition is where the relationship changes. Like your relationship with the medicine changes as you evolve, and the medicine changes you. And it's this kind of two-way street, and you hit right on it. You're like, yeah, my relationship to it now compared to when you started has grounded out and changed quite a bit. And I would love to hear, you said, you had some idealistic threads, as did I. So I would love to hear, like, what's that look like in real time? What was the idealism in the beginning, and what is the, like, grounded actual reality now for you?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of my, I did have a sense, like I said, at some point I developed this sense that these arts were connected.
Yeah.
And there was something about that connection that really appealed to me. It seemed like this complete system of traditional knowledge in which every arena of life was touched on. And, a lot of that though at the time I think came from exposure through watching kung fu movies and things like that. You know what I mean? So if that's your perspective, right? And you read, you read books like the Chronicles of Tao and things like that, and you have this idealized view of who these practitioners were. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we live in a time, and particularly I think in a society where we're really hungry for that traditional knowledge. And so knowing that, a lot of teachers like to sort of dangle carrots, like all of those secret mystery things that you saw in the movies are true.
Yes.
I have the secret to them.
Yep.
And all you have to do is pay and put in the time and keep paying, and eventually you'll get this secret knowledge.
Right.
So, I went down some of those paths, I was young and idealistic and hungry too. Right. It's a perfect opportunity, I think, for us to learn, because we can follow the path, and we can do the training as prescribed, and we see what results we get and what results we don't get. But we can also start to look at some of the people who are further down the path than us and say, well, God, it seems like they're saying I can get this, but I'm not sure that they actually have it. Now, come to think of it, I'm not seeing evidence of what the promises that are being made. So, some of it was hard, man. It was hard to feel disillusioned from that perspective and feel like
sobering
and to have your trust toyed with a bit and just feel it was kind of sad. So that was part of it, and then part of it also, I think, is a recognition of the power of the principles that we're gifted with through the medicine and through the martial arts and through the meditative arts, and a come to Jesus around what it would take to train that way to develop those to their full potential. And do we even have the time and energy and attention span in our current lifestyles to access that,
Yeah.
And so I realized along the way too that I don't. I have 2 kids and I have a business and I have, like
life.
I have life and not in the monastery. I'm not living in a cave in the mountains. And so I've had to sort of adjust my expectations based on that too.
Yeah. Well said. And I have a lot to mirror, in what you just said, but I agree with a lot of the same threads, same experiences. And I think, this has come up quite a few times in the people that I've interviewed on this podcast in particular about martial arts, the cultivation of these arts, and the sobering reality of how much time it actually takes to cultivate something. If you're striving for mastery in these things, there's the approach of go to a mountain for 10 years and study it day in and day out, isolate yourselves and just contain that bubble. Or you're going to be on the slower track because you have kids and you have life, and we live in 2019 and there's just bullshit afoot that we have to navigate in modern times. It's going to look different. And I think that's the thing that I think so many people, it's so common. It's nice to hear when people say it, because I'm like, I can relate, as can a lot of other people. Yeah. And there's that reality that we have to deal with these things. We're still going to get something out of it, but the arts ultimately have to adapt a little bit now too, if they want to survive. Like if we're going to pass them on, it's not going to look like that old traditional way, given the amount of technology we have. It's going to look different. And what I'm starting to see too is people that are not adapting, the old diehard traditionalists who are like, there's only one way to do this. And I'm like, boy, I hear you. And I think that was definitely right at a certain time in history. But if you don't adapt the teaching method and you don't like start getting seen in the digital world and you don't, it's like these things are just, they are going to lose their traction. And that for me, the idealism part, that was the part that was difficult for me, that it's going to look different than the monastery on the mountain, because there's something romantic about that. There's something so like go to the mountain and cultivate and be alone and just fully dive into the potential of what you are and what you can be. Like that's, it's very romantic and it's very alluring. And, Lillian Bridges, who's my face reading teacher, we talked about that a bunch. She's like, like it's, she read my face years back. She's like, you could do that. She's like, but getting married and have a baby is actually probably more like of what you're made of this go round. Like that's right. You can still do these things, still touch on them. And I think that's been the idealism piece that you touched on. I've had to like loosen my grip on that, like, okay, I'm going to live life and I'm going to do my stuff and I'm going to have kids and I'm going to, do this whole human number of just real time life. But it's hard to get to come to grips with when you're first being exposed.
I think it's really difficult to come to grips with, and it happens. I think coming to grips with it for me has come in stages and waves. I sort of been able to loosen a little bit each time I kind of, gain some sort of perspective on it. But one of the things I don't know did you ever know Rachel Abrams? She was a doctor in Santa Cruz.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. She's great. I worked with them at the Santa Cruz Integrative Medicine after I graduated from school. And Rachel and I were having a conversation one time and we were talking about this very thing, that juxtaposition of that desire to be on the mountaintop and cultivating, with everything that you've got versus living in the life that we, with family and relationships and work and business. And, we kind of ended that conversation with like, fuck, the monastery would be way easier than this.
Yeah.
That there's so much opportunity for growth, personal growth, and that this life actually can be a cultivation too. In fact, it has to be on some level. To engage it, I think, in the way that I can't remember the words you use, but what Jeffrey says, if you want to make this a living,
medicine
engaged,
tradition,
right, then every aspect of our lives is opportunity to engage.
Yes.
And opportunity, therefore, for growth.
Yeah, agreed fully. But, it's navigating like that. And I appreciate that you said that, because it is the idealistic thing when we start, right? We're like, we're going to do this and we're going to somehow reshape our lives to fit into that hole. And it's like, boy, not going to happen, with with the way things are. But I agree with you. It's been a beautiful journey to sort of take it's a metaphor that a lot of people use, but taking the training into everyday, into the monotonous, into the mundane, into the day-to-day activities.
That's so interesting because there is this sense, I read this somewhere. I wish I could remember now the source, but somebody was talking about, traditional training, martial arts or meditation or any of it. And they were like, if you're not bored as shit, you're doing something wrong. Right. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that idea of the monotonous, that's part of it, regardless of which path you take.
That's
that
so
at
true.
some point it's got to get monotonous or you're not doing it right, which was profound. I really appreciated that because, I do. I get bored. I get,
of course,
I get bored with my practices and I get bored with my life. And, and I long for, and so part of that desire for the mountaintop is a bit of, stokes that charge in us for that excitement of that romantic deal,
Yeah. Well, and there's kind of a cool, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know how cool it is. It's just interesting to watch, but as people go forward, and we're all people that are studying these things and trying to keep aspects of Chinese medicine alive, whether you're doing feng shui, herbalism, acupuncture, martial arts, whatever it is that you're putting your energy into, what I've seen with like the Qigong movement and what I've seen with Tai Chi, there's it's such a like circus sometimes. You go online and you've got everything from like the telekinetic Jedi chi projection people who can like levitate people with their hands. And then you've got people who are totally capitalizing on the energy and spirit of the mountain, right? Like
Yeah.
they're trying to sensationalize the mystical potential of what it could be. And they try to give these people really intense, life-changing experiences in a weekend. And then it's like they have the opening, right? They kind of blow out and just like, wow, I felt something in my body from breathing. And then there's no infrastructure for them to fall back on. And then they kind of, it's almost like they look for the excitement, the next workshop, just to get that hit again. But in the end, you fast forward 5 years, and I've known some of these people and seen them. I'm like, but what do you actually... Where's the monotonous thing that you can repeat? Do you have that? And they're like, yeah, but I don't want to repeat that. You know, like they get kind of like they want to avoid it. Right. They go to the next workshop, and it's, you know, I appreciate that you said that, because I've had times in my training where there are things that I've really just repeated over and over and over and over again to the point where I want to pull my hair out.
Yeah.
And invariably something powerful always comes out of it. It's like, that's the threshold. You just have to get through that monotony.
100%.
And then you're like, aha, there's something in here. And that's sort of, that, like you said, it's beautiful. It's like, wow, that is profound. There's something worth scoping out here.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it never lasts, that aha moment. It never lasts as long as you'd like it to, because then you just kind of got to get back to work. It really is. It's, you know, the idea of kind of going to a workshop and having these massive sort of opening moments is, you know, it's the way oftentimes psychedelics get used also, right? Yep. It's like having a helicopter come and pick you up from the trailhead, fly you to the top of the mountain, let you see the vista, right? And then the helicopter picks you, you know, you can't stay there.
Nope.
Right? You get dropped back off at the trailhead, and if you're really committed to going back and doing it right, then you start walking up the fucking mountain.
Correct.
Right? And so,
correct.
You know, we get a glimpse of what that might be like, whether it's through, you know, it's through these aha moments. But to actually truly sustain those kind of realizations, it takes doing the work. As far as I can tell, I mean, I haven't seen another way yet.
No, there's no shortcuts.
There's no shortcuts.
And if they are, I feel like they're like the loop, right? It's like, oh, it's a shortcut that actually brings you right back to kind of where you started. Like it's like a side little break. I feel like it's not really an actual shortcut. Well, let me ask you this, because you and I both, you know, we both kind of been very heavily influenced by the martial art traditions, and you're a kinesthetic body aware person. I remember when you taught Lee's class and I loved your alignment breakdown. I'm like, yeah, man, this is like, you're speaking my language. Right. So there were some good pieces in there, but you studied Yang style Tai Chi. That's what you teach right now, correct? So
yeah, I mean, I've studied a bunch of different martial arts, but that's been the thread that's run through all of it from the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
That was like your baby in the beginning, and it's the one you're with now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you are teaching Tai Chi now, and I'm sure you have some people that are patients, people that are like associated with you, and then you've got people coming in, you know, how do you bridge the teaching of Tai Chi as an aspect of Chinese medicine? Do you keep it, you know, sort of as a movement practice? Like, how do you disseminate the art in a way that's, do you give it context, or do you sort of let it be quiet and, you know, find them? Like, how do you approach it? Because everyone's a little different, and I'm always curious.
That's a really great question. People come to the art for lots of different reasons, right? Most people are looking for, you know, a health practice. People are looking for a meditative practice.
Yep.
You know, an energy practice, whatever that means. And some people are looking for martial art. So really, you know, the beautiful thing about this art is that no matter what you're coming to the art looking for, the basic underlying core principles of the art will serve that purpose, whether it's martial arts, health practice, meditative art. So there is no need to water down those principles. In fact, to water down those principles or to leave them out altogether, which I think happens a lot, is doing everyone a disservice. Again, the people looking for the health practice are not going to get the health benefits that they could get certainly the people obviously looking for a martial art are never going to be able to progress. People looking for a meditative practice are going to be awash in sort of this nebulous gray area of, I don't even know what I'm supposed to focus on. Right. So with the focus on core principles, it really should serve everyone no matter what. And so I kind of, on day one, night one of a class, it's sort of like, okay, look, this is a principles-based approach to this art. And in the end, it doesn't matter what form you do. It doesn't matter how far you go. If you find a way to embody these principles in movement, you, in a sense, you are successful in your approach to the art. So that's sort of the starting place. And then, other than that, it's, what's most interesting to me is the martial stuff. And so I am always looking for those people who sort of catch the bug, so a wave of beginners come in, and there'll be one or two out of 10 or 15 that really, you can see it, it's sort of like, oh, this is really deep and intelligent art, and I want more. And so those are the people that I'm really interested in so actually I'm really stoked right now that I have a student who has been with me for about 4 years now, two actually, husband and wife, and they've just been super dedicated. And so this time, this next round of beginners forms classes, they're going to be teaching.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I'm really stoked about that, because the beginners forms classes can drag, and because there's not that single point focus of the entire class being in it for the same reason, sort of. Correct. It doesn't feel like the best use of my time to teach that class. So I think it's important, and I'm really glad to offer it. I just don't want to teach it anymore.
Yeah, fair enough, man. Yeah, I think that you're not the only one. People get to that place where they want to get into the deeper stuff with the people that are really, amped to be there. So the thing that I've noticed too in teaching Tai Chi is that, I've had, I started teaching in Sacramento about 4 years ago. So I've got and I've had there's a sizable handful of people that have been with me since that time, that have been there consistently, same thing. And to see where they are at the 4-year mark, we're like, wow, there's really some sizable shifts now in terms of how their bodies are moving. And this is a lead into my next question for you, because when I talk to people about the benefits, I'm like, okay, you're 4 years in now. Like, what's different in your life? And it's a little different for everybody, but there are some threads that I'm always, it didn't occur to me to even ask that question until about a year ago. I don't know why, but I kind of was like, I know what it's done for me, but I started to get curious, because I was seeing that they were moving differently. I'm like, so what the hell, what's going on inside your life? Because it changed mine. And I've got a few different things that I've heard. One is people are less reactive. That's one. Like my mom, who's been with me for 4 years. She came to my class just to be supportive, but she's like, I never thought I would love this and enjoy teaching it and doing this kind of thing.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's very cool. So she came in, but she's like, I'm way less reactive. Like, stuff sort of, if there's a problem with something in the political sphere, she's like, yeah, it bothers me, but it's way less. Like, it just kind of comes in and out. There's a yielding to it. I kind of, just deflect it. I move with it. It's not a big deal. And then she's got, of course, the mobility stuff. She's like, yeah, I wasn't able to bend over and wash my face in the sink. Now I can. Like, my low back is way more limber. And then other people say that they're just physically sometimes stronger, or they're more attentive to how they navigate their terrain, how they walk, like how they go through the grocery store. When they cook, they can just feel that things are moving differently. But I would love to hear if you've asked your students, or if you've seen or experienced what changes for the people that have been with you for a period of time when they've been doing Tai Chi. Do they talk about it? Do they say anything about what's different for them?
God, that's such a great question, Gray. I'm gonna ask my next class. I'm gonna ask everybody in that class what's changing for them, because I realize that that's not a question I regularly ask, and it's a beautiful question. I know for some of my more advanced students that have been with me for a long time, I because we've been together for long periods of time, and we see each other not just in classes but in private lessons and things like that too. So I know what they're looking for.
Yes.
And it's different for different people. You know, I have one student who is really, really in it for trying to wrangle focus and attention. And it's a great art for that.
Yeah,
and
it is.
It's such immediate feedback when you're not paying attention. The way your body moves is completely different to when you are paying attention. And so that kind of feedback, particularly too, right, if you get into push hands, because then you get even more immediate feedback. You know, you could maybe fudge it a bit if it's a solo form or a solo practice,
right?
And you're not paying attention, then you're not paying attention. So it takes somebody from the outside saying, hey, you know, you need to pay attention to the hip track, or you need to sink into the legs, or whatever it is. But from a push hands perspective, of course, you get immediate feedback.
Yeah, you
feel that the way that your ability to align your structure has everything to do with how the interaction's going. So I think that's really important, and I that's something that I really try and impart to people, that push hands, you don't have to have any interest in the martial aspects of Tai Chi to get huge benefit from push hands practice.
Yeah,
because you do get that feedback. And so that's one of the huge things you were saying, like when you see something shift for people, probably the biggest shift that I ever see is somebody can be doing form in some cases, they've been doing form not with me, but for 20 or 30 years.
Right.
But they've never done any push hands practice, and then they do just very basic push hands practice, and all of a sudden it's like that, wow.
Yeah.
This, I had no idea what I was doing, and now everything's changed.
There's so many different directions I could go with this. So when we were talking before this podcast, and you told me that your system has a pretty in-depth, you were lucky to be exposed to a very in-depth push hands. Over the years of everything that I've trained, that's like one of the deficiencies in my larger structure. I've got very little structured push hands. I've got stuff that I've picked up from like friends and acquaintances and, touching teachers for a period of time, but it's never been a structured thing. And it's one of the things that I'm always sort of knowing as I go forward. I'm like, I have to like fill this discrepancy, right? And so where I kind of fill the discrepancy is like doing more martially oriented forms, studying Xingyi. I started studying Xingyi with Tim Cartmel. And he's like, I got him on the podcast a while back. I think he was episode 22. I can't remember. I don't want to give the wrong episode, but I had him on, and when we were talking about this was one of the things that came up. Just what you said, which is, the structure, the common ground, essentially what we got out of that interview was, the common ground between the healing aspect of the arts and the fighting aspect is this biomechanical structure. They both share this share the same common ground, right? Like the mechanics that will yield healthy joints and fluid compression and all that good stuff is still going to be the same as the stuff that it's just how you turn the volume up on it. Like, do you want it for explosive power, or do you want it for like deep internal nourishment to fluids and joints? So we got to this place, and I've realized, I've had to adapt that very thing that you're talking about, which is, now muscle testing is something that like Tim brought into the picture, as well as Jared Lash, who hosts him in Arizona when I go. Jared's awesome. But muscle testing, essentially what I think is push hands is doing. When I've done good push hands, people are putting force into your structure to see where you can identify your discrepancies and theirs, right? That it's a two-way street. You're like, whoa, what I thought was this really beautiful soft posture is actually kind of pointless in a sense if these things are not happening, because it doesn't hold any weight. It can't receive force. And recently, as of like just a few months ago, I started doing structure testing with my students, and I put we have a hardwood floor in the studio. And so we put these like wool rugs or wool blankets underneath one person's feet. And I have them hold a posture, put one leg back, one forward, and we get them into a Tai Chi posture. And then we have people push them. And if the structure is correct, they just slide across the floor in that position, right?
Right,
so
they just collapsing.
Without collapsing, and their body's not moving. And it's amazing just to see when we push on people right away, if their back is off, right? They push in their back and they start to stand up, and I'm like, nope. Angle's not quite right. There's so there's some cool things, but I think you're I think you're absolutely right. Like if that piece is missing, I feel like the efficacy of the arts, and even at a health level, right? Like you said, even if you're not fighting, you still need to understand that your body has some biomechanical principles that are solid. They're on point, and they're going to be, needed to go to the deeper levels. So
Absolutely.
when you're doing the push hands with people, what do you notice in terms of like what's the biggest hitch for people? Is it they don't like touching other people? Do they think it's violent? Like is there any kind of like pushback from push hands?
Yeah. Right. No pun intended. So yeah, I think the biggest challenge is, okay, actually I would say there's challenges on both ends of the spectrum. On the one end of the spectrum, it's just getting somebody in the door who doesn't think that they're at all interested in any of the martial aspects of the art.
Yeah.
They didn't come here for that. They're not interested in that. They came here as a health practice,
it's like a
et cetera.
hex.
So,
yeah, they're just like, get away.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. So convincing them that they should just try it, and then creating a very safe environment, right? Because that's the other thing people are scared of is that they're going to walk in to people breaking boards and and like they just don't know.
Right.
They're scared. They don't want to get hurt.
Yep.
They don't want to get pushed around. So creating that safe environment. On the other side, actually, interestingly, I find this a lot, which is people who look at building a push hands curriculum from the ground up. Because in a sense, in order to get the mechanics right, and you touched on this, you sort of have to take the martial component out of it, or rather the competitive component out of it,
right?
In order to build, a strong foundation. So what you were saying is a great example, right? Most people come in, if they have that competitive, if they're a martial artist, they're already a fighter and they have that mindset, then they come in and all they want to do is win.
Yeah.
Right? I want to push you off your base. And so rather than let me use this interaction to find where my deficiencies are, which is what you were saying, right?
Yeah.
And let this force fill me up and point out the places where I need improvement as a way to become more efficient in the use of my structure and principles. So I think on both sides of that spectrum, there are challenges to people. So oftentimes on the fighting end, on the people who come in from other martial arts, they have to let go of some of that. I am doing this to you. And it's less of a doing, right, and more of a being. And that sounds really, spiritual and everything, but it's true, right? Like this is truly in order to, like what you were saying, right? Posture testing is a great example. It's not the posture that you're holding. It's really easy to think about from an application perspective, this is what I'm doing to someone. But I think before you ever go there, it's really about, can I make a strong shape?
Yeah.
Can I make a strong shape with my body and maintain that strength, that integrity of a structure?
Yep.
Right. And if you can't do that, because you're always thinking about what you're supposed to be doing to this imaginary opponent, which creates all sorts of tension lines in the body and, know what I mean, breaks the structure down more than it builds it up, then there's challenges there on that side too.
Yeah. It's pretty cool to have that. It took me a while to get that realization. It's kind of a contradiction. When I got into, I don't know, I couldn't make sense of my head in my 20s. I was, 20s are a crazy time. But like when I got into martial arts and started like really, diving into study formally, my first style was a Kuksul Wan, which is an internal, external Korean style. One of the best instructors I've ever had, if not the best, Chuck Duran. And he, when we got in there, I wanted to study the fighting arts, but I was very adverse to doing any. I was also anti-violence, and I was just very kind of excessively idealistic and passive in my mindset. And I kind of equated that like violence is just bad. And I think it is fundamentally, it's not a great thing. But I was in that place of like, I can't study fighting arts because it's going to make me more aggressive, and it's fundamentally not spiritually aligned with who and what I am. And I just kind of had this record in my head. And then I remember sort of as I was training martial arts, I was sort of sidestepping the martial application. Like I would train the kicks and I would do the things and I would throw the punches, but I was not wanting to interact with a person. And it really started to bite me ass about 5 years into my training. I mean, it was always biting me, but I didn't realize it until I got into it. And then once I realized that piece, I thought, damn it, like I've really been missing out on that, structure piece. Like it's not just a pretty movement. It's not just a blind execution. There needs to be some kind of structure. And then when I embraced it, things started to get considerably better. But I've found there are people that are of the same mindset. It was good for me to be there, overly idealistic. So that was kind of cool, to see that and to understand that and come to that place over time. I was glad to finally find the mark.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, there is no way around it that no matter what you think you're doing, unless it gets tested, you just can't know whether it's effective or not.
That's absolutely right, man. Do you think, I guess in the context of this stuff, like when you're doing Tai Chi, doing all of your Chinese medicine stuff, do you feel like, is there cohesiveness between these things that you're doing? Like, I know personally, like when you're doing acupuncture, how much, like, what would you say of acupuncture, of your Chinese medicine pie? How much of it is acupuncture? How much of it is?
Well, honestly, I'd say 90% of my patients who walk in the door get acupuncture.
Okay.
Maybe 85. There are some people I just do herbs with, but almost everyone, when they show up, we're going to do some acupuncture to support, even if we're primarily doing herbs. So herbs are the primary treatment method. We're still doing some acupuncture to support that treatment when they come in.
Got it. And do you, in your own personal experience, like, are you seeing cohesiveness between like your Tai Chi practice, your acupuncture practice, your herbal practice? And if so, what is that cohesiveness? Like, what is the common thread? Like, what's the confluence there?
God, that's such a great question, man. I remember when I was in school, acupuncture school, and I think I was like an intern at that point. So I was in my last year, maybe in clinic, and I was seeing my own patients, right? Supervisors in the back room. And, oftentimes the younger students will come to see you. Yeah. An older student, right, in clinic.
For sure.
And, so at that time I was teaching a Tai Chi class at Five Branches. And, so one of the younger students who had been in my Tai Chi class came to see me in clinic. And she asked me, what's the connection between Tai Chi and I was at the point, I think when we begin, like it's sort of, at first mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. Then mountains are no longer mountains, rivers are no longer rivers. And then again, mountains are mountains, rivers are rivers.
Yep.
I was in that place where I was just like, when she asked me that question, I was like, I have no fucking idea.
No clue. No clue.
I have no idea what the connection is. I thought I did.
Right.
In the early days, I thought I knew what the connection was. And then, I think now what the connection is to me has to do with true holism. So, I've been blessed to study with teachers who, taught me acupuncture techniques from the perspective of truly connecting to the skeletal system. And then all of a sudden, all these push hands, this experience of push hands really comes in where you're sort of riding the skeleton. And, that was profound. It was like, oh, shit, there it is. That's one of it. But really, I think more than that even, because, how do you apply that to herbs, for instance? That it's just really about a complete view of life. I think it goes back to looking at those old kung fu movies, and the thing that drew me to that was this idea of a Renaissance man, someone who has proficiency in multiple areas of life, and that we don't always have to delegate our responsibility to for our health and wellness to others. We can take care of ourselves, and that requires, to some degree, a Renaissance approach, meaning being proficient in multiple different arenas of life.
Yep.
And so obviously in the Chinese arts, again, we go back to those philosophical underpinnings are the same, right? So it does start to, when you start to look at yin yang and five element and, and Bagua, and you start to see how those things apply to medicine and apply to martial arts and apply to, you start to put that together a bit. Mm-hmm. But I think even more than that, it's just about, it goes back to what you were saying about Jeffrey Yuen, right? It's about mm-hmm. living this engaged life.
Right. And staying engaged, staying active, and staying, connected to it and letting it change you. One of my undergrad was a sculpture, ceramics, and drawing major. That was like my whole family, like, are artists, and I come from that kind of lineage. And I remember one of my teachers saying to me, she said, when you look at a piece of art, she says, you have to let it in and let it dialogue with you. There is an opening that you have to let artwork kind of come into you. Otherwise, she's like, if you just blanket it and you're like, that's a political piece, and you just won't give it the time of day, or if you shut yourself down, she said, it doesn't really work. Art is fully an opening process for it to change you. It has to like hit you.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, it blew me away at like 22. I was like, that is deep. Like, you do have to let art in. It's not just you go after it. It's definitely a receiving kind of thing. And I thought, damn, that's very true with these arts, right? With Chinese medicine, you have to let it in, and you have to live it and adopt it and practice it and see where it takes you. And the crazy thing is, right, it all speaks to us a little differently. It's like everyone paints the apple a little different. Mm-hmm. You got 30 people in a room, and it's like, paint the apple. Everyone's going to be a little bit different,
I think, God, that was that's deep, man. That's really profound. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
And I think that, one of the things, if I look at it from that perspective, one of the things about all the Chinese arts that I feel engaged with every day is the fact that I have a living relationship that requires me to show up every single day with these arts. Mm-hmm. It's not like you get it and you move on.
Yeah.
Right? None of these arts are linear in that way. They're all that circular knowledge. And so if I truly want to do my part and show up for the art and honor the gift of these arts that I've been, given, then I have to double down every day and kind of dig a little deeper. And so in a sense, it's almost like these arts have taught me about commitment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. About how to commit myself to an imperfect relationship, because all relationships are.
Yeah.
And let the arts, like you were saying, let the arts change me. Let them pull me forward into, again, not into mastery, but toward mastery as our beacon that we're aiming for, that we'll never reach. Mm-hmm. It does every day. It pulls me forward, and I get lazy and I get tired and I just want to shut down. And then the next day I show up and it's like, okay, I get a new patient walk in the door, something challenging, or I get a student ask me something in class, or something in my own. I have to reinvigorate my love, my passion, my commitment. Yep. And then peel off another layer and dive deeper.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed, man. I mean, I could not agree more. And where this started to really, this idea, that thing that my teacher, Sherry Simon, said to me, she said, let the art in. I mean, I remember sitting with that idea for a long time. And when I was studying Tai Chi, really intensely many years back and really trying to get into it and just wrapping my mind around it, it started to sink in, especially in recent years when I've been teaching. You're actively teaching, and my teacher's in Kunming, China. So like, how often do I see him? I'm left. Right. The form is my teacher. Yeah. It's sort of like, that's the thing I'm brought back to, and I have to train it. And when my teaching is getting stale, or I'm feeling like I'm not providing any kind of new insight, I'll go to the form and I'll just run it like just maybe 50 times in a day. Just boom, 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 boom. And invariably things crop up out of that. I'm like, holy shit, that's something to touch on. That was a little different. There's this thing. And I think that's the cool thing, is that built into these gestures there's an intrinsic intelligence that's, it's like something you're attaching to, right? Like you're riding it. And then while you
Yeah.
ride it, you get to feel the bumps and you get to feel the terrain. And then you're like, okay. And I'll go back and help my students navigate that terrain a little better. But I mean, that's the thing I've realized, that it's like, it is built into the structure, right? It's built into the movements that, like you said at the beginning, it's an intelligent art, highly intelligent. Like there's a lot. Yeah. It's elegant and it's smart. It's very sharp in that way. And I was going to say to your piece that you mentioned a minute ago too, you know, when you were saying the common thread, right? It's this relationship to commitment. There's like this thing that's like been very real for you. And I would say for me, the thing that one of the common threads, because I would agree with yours 100%. And the other one is, you know, I don't like using the word intention because it gets a little woo-woo new agey sometimes, but the intentionality behind these things has really started to it started to get in there. It's a common thread. The use of acupuncture needles, you know, dropping the needle in, sending your intent of what system you're attempting to stimulate and what affect you're trying to create in the person. Yes. Tai Chi, good God, intent on where your hands shape, where something moves, how your spine compresses. You're constantly intending into your body. And then Lillian Bridges said something about feng shui in the couple episodes back. She said, everyone gets into this thing about, you know, change your bed and change your life, you know, change the direction of your bed and your life changes. And she's like, that's not really what it is. When people start shifting their environments, it's because they're intending to change something in their life. And there's this intention piece. And that's, you know, I don't have it. I think in 10 years we'll hop on another call and I'll be like, Tony, I got new things that are common, you know, but for now, intention seems to be pretty strong, where I'm like, that is a confluent thread through all of them so far for me. Like that's pretty damn consistent. And, you know, herbs were like my weakest area. I'm getting better with adaptogens and tonic herbs and stuff. But even with herbs, I mean, you are intending an effect as a result of a relationship. You know what that plant does. And so all these things kind of come together in a really beautiful tapestry, you know, but it's still kind of, I mean, it definitely feels like a mystery. I'm still kind of navigating it. Like I don't have all of it, but I'm like, here's one thread I know that's solid, you know?
Well, I love what you said. You know, there was a running joke in our Taiji group, and this was my original sort of posse up in Vancouver, that, you know, the answer to everything was like, oh, just give it 10 years. You know?
So true.
No, you don't get it. Oh, just give it 10 years.
It's fine.
Yeah, and it is true, right? I think we could definitely have another discussion in 10 years and 10 years after that and 10 years after that and be giving very different answers. Because I love how you said that, man, is we are riding it, you know? Yeah. It's like, it's taken us for a ride. And I think we, especially maybe in our culture, we maybe most of us approach these arts as, I'm going to do Chinese medicine, right? You know, or I'm going to do Tai Chi, or I'm going to do martial arts. And really in the end, I think to achieve any deep level of understanding, we do kind of have to release and let the art teach us. And we have to submit ourselves to some degree to the process.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult process. I mean,
very difficult.
It's been not easy for me. Relinquishing the control, you know, relinquishing the grip has not been the easiest feat. And, but the more I do it, the better things get. And I've also seen the teachers that I've had over the years, some good, some not so good. And the ones that have the really tight grip, oh boy, it's just so not sustainable. Like
I know.
It falls apart something fierce. Like people that are just like, this is how it's done and you have to do it this way. And I'm like, whoa, time. First of all, that feels shitty. Like at a fundamental level to me, I'm like, get the fuck off the horse. You like, ultimately you don't know either, even if you're 10 years older than I am. I mean, you don't know either fully. Like people are better at it, but then the people that are, you know, the teachers that are like, have a healthy dose of, I don't know. But here's how I've done it, and try it that way and see what it's like for you. I mean, that approach has been so much healthier, but I also realized too, you know, you got to have really firm structure in some ways. You know, it's a very contradictory process.
Well, as yin and yang, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so true, right? That on the one hand, we do have to hold ourselves, our focus, our intention, and at the same time, we have to release and let go.
Yes.
That's yin and yang.
Yeah. Yes, it is, my friend. Why you got to be so difficult? Why? Why indeed?
I have one of my primary actually Taiji teacher has always said he sort of considers himself not a teacher as much as a what did he say, like a researcher essentially. Like he believes that his students are not necessarily students, but they're essentially like lab assistants, and he's putting forth hypotheses, and then everybody's sort of working those things out, and then he's constantly observing, okay, how does this actually work? How does this actually play out? Like, this works for me, but does it work for 80% of the class? Or does it work for these two guys over here because they're built similar to me, or they have mindsets, so having that openness again to working with it.
Yeah.
Showing up to it every day and asking questions of it, and then being open enough to hear the answers rather than, imposing your answers on the art.
Oh man, you just threw me into a full like flashback. Like what you just said hit a pretty strong chord, and it. So I'll drop this in here because just the way you said that is exactly so. God, it was about 1.5 or 2 years ago now. I did 2 ayahuasca ceremonies. It's the only 2 I've ever done, and that was plenty. I'm like, I might be full for 5 years. I have no idea, but there was plenty in there. And true to form, like you said, it was the helicopter ride. But when I got up there, I was like, I don't want to take another ride. I think I'm going to go back to the forest, be covered in the canopy for a while, and just deal with what I just saw. But that was exactly, man, God, the way you just said that, I thought, like, that's exactly how it felt. When I went into the ayahuasca ceremony, I didn't mean to do this. It was more of kind of like a subconscious like program I was running. But when I went into that ceremony, I was definitely showing up to the metaphoric ayahuasca bar, if it were a building, and was walking in and was like, I'd like a couple shots, and I'd like you to really like blow my mind. There was definitely that kind of an energy of me going to it and saying like,
let's get this party started.
Yeah, let's get this going. Like, open the doorway, And I don't know how long it was in, but I think it was about an hour in. It felt like the ayahuasca, spirit, whatever, got incredibly large. Like I was an ant and it was a redwood tree. Like, it just got massively large, and it kind of just towered over me and looked down on me and just stared at me. And I remember just inside, just shrinking and being like, oh God, I think I've just approached this the wrong way. And it was like, no. You don't come in and ask and like tell me or ask for what you want. I tell you what you need. And I remember just being like, okay. And I remember I just sat there in silence, like internally for a long time waiting. And then it was like the journey sort of began. But what you just, that's exactly it, man. Like, it was like, you don't come to it and take something. It's like, it's a reciprocal relationship, but it's definitely going to be giving something to you. And it kind of goes back to that opening up to the art thing, like letting it in
absolutely.
And hands off, like, all right, this thing's going to school me in the way it needs to.
I mean, the fact that these arts are so old and that so many people so much smarter and more dedicated than us have built and passed on. Like if I made any small contribution that was recognized by anyone,
right, it
would be a massive win. Like, I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
That could even be possible, because it is. I mean, it's. I love how you said that. Like, you're an ant, and the ayahuasca is a redwood tree, but these arts are like that too. They're like ants in the face of
something large.
Yeah, massive.
Right. Incredibly big, much bigger. Well, I got a question for you. So, given that, and like you said, the people that came before us, right? These traditions that have been so much smarter, and or that have just essentially fabricated and created these arts, right? And they've given them structure for something to be passed down. Like, what's your vote? When people have asked me, they're like, so how did people figure out Tai Chi? How did they figure out all these mechanics inside the body? How did they figure out meridians? How did they figure out which plants did what? How did they figure? And I'm like, oh boy, like, how do you even answer that question? But I'm always like, loosely, I'm like, I vote extraterrestrials. Like they probably
Yeah.
came down, like the star people helped
Yeah.
us. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But like, what do you make of it? Like something as complex as Tai Chi, which has all of these crazy things that really do have real effect on the body. What's your vote? Like, how do you think that came about? Like,
Yeah, they were high. For sure. They were super high.
super high.
No, that's a great question, man. I think it probably varies. So I'll tell you two of the things that I think are really interesting. One is, I mentioned that I studied Native American spiritual traditions in my early years. I'd say, I guess I still do. I'm still highly passionate and interested in indigenous spiritual traditions. And, particularly one of my mentors in that work was sort of an expert in Plains Indian spiritual traditions. And the importance of dreams and visionary reality was profound in that culture. In other words, it's almost like while there was a structure of spiritual practice, it was highly subjective also, in that any information that was received through the visionary field or through dreams had to be given credit by the community at large. Yeah. Even if there was only one person that's saying this, but if they received it from the spirits, it was valid information. Particularly if they could turn that information into, utilitarian, into knowledge that could be used by the people. Right. So oftentimes, maybe the benefits of a particular plant for healing might be given to someone in a dream or in a vision or something like this.
Sure.
So, I think that is very real. It's not just Plains Native traditions.
I would agree.
Yeah, it's human. That's something we have access to as humans. So I think that's part of it. And then on the other side, I think, you were asking about Taiji specifically. I had an opportunity actually when I was in Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz is sort of the hub of the CrossFit phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Like that, where it all started. And I trained.
I knew it was busy there. Did it really kind of start there?
No, it absolutely started there.
Really?
Like that. Santa Cruz is the birthplace of CrossFit.
I did not know that. I knew it was big there. I didn't know for that reason though.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Okay, that's
it's pretty interesting. So the very first affiliate CrossFit gym was over off Mission, and I trained there for a while, and those guys were awesome. And so Olympic weightlifting is a part of is a strong part of aspect of Taiji. Of CrossFit, and they're great coaches, and the coaches at CrossFit Santa Cruz. And I remember thinking when they were coaching me on the mechanics of Olympic weightlifting, I was just like, fuck, this is Taiji,
Yeah.
That to some degree, bodies move the way bodies move, right? And there is an efficient way to move a body.
Right.
And to exert force and power against another object.
Right.
And we figured that out over millennia of using our bodies, whether it's pushing a hoe or pushing a wheelbarrow or fighting or, and so I think to some degree there's that too, of it's just trial and error to some degree.
Time and observation, right?
Yeah.
Taking inventory.
Yeah, you're in the research lab, right?
Right. You're there just watching and paying attention. That's absolutely right. Well, I think, that first piece, so you said like the time and observation, and then the first piece, like the plant, dialogue and the dream piece.
Sure.
That's I think very accurate. Like I think that's that is a big piece of it. And I'm sure you're familiar with Chenmen Ching.
Sure.
So he, in one of his books, and I forget which book it is, but I was reading about it when he had this huge breakthrough in his Tai Chi training, and it was through a dream. It was the dream radically upgraded his practice, and he said it was from that point on the way he approached Tai Chi and his understanding and his ability to not be pushed, like when people would push on him and it felt like it was pushing a sheet. They were like, where is he? Like they can't find his root and stuff. And one of the dream he had was he'd been training. There was a period in his life where he was training 7 to 8 hours a day, and he would train so much Tai Chi that he was drenched in sweat, which is not typical to be drenched in sweat from Tai Chi training, but he was just working his body and just, pushing in all these different directions. And he had this dream where he, in the dream, he was doing Tai Chi in a park where he always trains, but this time he had no arms, and he was just a torso and legs doing Tai Chi. And so his arms weren't there, and it was like an armless body. And he said he realized his legs went all the way up to his like neck, like it was basically like.
Wow.
So he said when he was doing the exercises, when he would push from that point forward, his legs from conceptually had always been kind of at his like qua. His legs started from there in his mind originally, and then after that dream, he said he conceptualized his legs up.
That is so interesting.
Isn't that crazy? He said his legs like went up to his traps, and like
I love that.
So he said, that changed dramatically. And when I read that, like, I don't know, 15 years ago or whatever, I remember being like, oh man, I want to have a dream about Tai Chi, like so bad. I'm like waiting for it, and then dude, like 2-3 years ago, I had one dream about Tai Chi, and it was, I wasn't armless, but I was doing Tai Chi, but I had a third leg, and the third leg was quite literally like between my two legs, I had a third leg, like it just looked like a regular foot that was growing out of my pelvic floor. And every time I would transition from left to right, that middle leg would actually like support and push up when I would transition from left to right. And I was like, God, that's so cool, because that one little tiny thing really helped me like conceptualize my training different. And I think that Dreamtime thing that you're talking about, like that's a doorway I think like practitioners, and regardless of whether we're going to be these huge influences in the art, I think we have to sort of be open to that piece that like dreams do drop some knowledge, right? They do.
Absolutely.
They bring in that next little layer that might be really helpful.
Yeah. I've had that's been a pretty profound piece of my journey all along. And, I've had dreams really alter the course of my, or set. It's funny, actually, I'll just say this. I have a dream right now that I probably had maybe 20 years ago, that in the last 3 years, the memory of that dream and this one key element of the dream, actually it was kind of where the dream ended, which was sort of a point of tension that is guiding a lot of the work that I'm doing now still, because I'm still trying to figure out the mystery of that one moment in the dream. Right. And so I'm constantly referencing that in my life currently. Yeah. It was a 20 years ago dream, but it's like there was a lesson in that I'm still working out. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's cool, man. I like hearing that you said that, and just that you've got, I can tell, and I knew years back when I met you, and you had an open mind kind of approach to this stuff. Like there's definitely, you're not just like narrow tunnel vision type person, So
no, not at all.
I appreciate that. And I aim for that too, because I've, like I said, I've been with the narrow teachers, and it just doesn't work, and it doesn't suit. And I don't think it's natural either. I don't think it's like actually aligned with how this stuff works. I think it is.
Life is too big, man. Life is too big to have a narrow view like that. Like we just miss so much. I mean, I'm just really interested, Right. That's really what it comes down to.
Right. Happy to view the show. Right.
Yeah.
Well, Tony, in kind of closing, I do this with all my guests, and we've usually, most of my guests, there's usually some broad things that we touch on, and we touched on, Tai Chi. We talked about just Chinese medicine as a whole. What's your invitation to people if they are, I would say, new to this world, or they're new to, Chinese medicine or Tai Chi, or any of these sort of alternative systems that look at life in a larger, comprehensive context? What's your invitation to people in general in like engaging this stuff?
That's great. Be patient, because none of this, and I believe this about life too, it's not linear. None of this is linear. And so there's we're trained, if we were to go into Western medicine, for example, it's A equals B, B equals C, C equals D. Right. It's a pretty straightforward path to understand a process from that perspective. Sure. But these arts they don't follow that path. And so to put I think a lot of times maybe we put pressure on ourselves to get it when there ain't no getting it. Yeah. I had a teacher who was really, in a really fine show of humility. It was just like, there ain't no perfection, There's just every year, hopefully, we get a little more, or a little less wrong. Essentially, he's like, I'm not perfect, right? But I'm less wrong than you probably. But my teacher, he's less wrong than me. and
Right.
his teacher before him is less wrong than him. Like
Right.
we just going to circle around it, and we're going to get it a little bit deeper each time. Right. And if we have the patience and again, the openness, to allow it to affect us, to allow that knowledge to seep in and connect with one of the things about the Chinese arts that is talked about from the very beginning is this idea of microcosm, macrocosm.
Yeah.
And I think we all rush to try and figure out what that means, or we make up answers to what that means.
Right.
But I think this is the process to understanding that, because as this stuff settles in and these concepts filter into us, then they will naturally, by affinity, connect with those things that are in us. And we are a reflection of that process. And so I don't think we can understand that until we do. And there's not really any rushing it. It's just a continued commitment to studying, to going deeper, to living it, to engaging it in a living way. And so it's just patience, and it takes time, and there's no substitute for it. Like you said, there's no shortcuts.
Yeah.
So just settle in, enjoy the ride.
Yeah, right. Get comfortable with the difficulty, right? It's going to be here. Well, Tony, thank you for being here and doing this interview, and just, giving your take on all these things. I love hearing different practitioners' approach to Chinese medicine, like I said, because it is a living medicine tradition, and we're all going to kind of engage it. So thank you for that. And if people want to check you out, they want to follow you on social media or get a hold of you or just see what you're doing with this stuff, what's the best way to do that?
So the website that I really, the only website I have is a website for our clinic, which is Thrive Integrative Medicine, and it's thrivespace.net. So THRIVESPACE.net.
Okay.
And I've been working for a while to sort of put an internal arts page on there that people can link to, that sort of gives my background and stuff like that. I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah. In due time.
But then I have an Instagram account that's at Tony Galis Internal Arts, and that's is just a fun place to get some flavor.
Yeah.
But people email me if somebody's interested, or they have a question, or they want to talk to me. I love it. I love this kind of discourse. I really appreciate what you're doing, Gray. I think it's awesome.
Thanks, man.
And I love this kind of discourse, and I think it's super important for us moving forward.
Yeah.
So Tony at thrivespace.net. Shoot me an email.
Beautiful.
Holla. Yeah.
Yeah. Holla for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, man. And I appreciate the work you're doing, and just the life force that you're putting into this stuff. Cause I think, we are all contributing to life in its own way, but I think these things are really powerful, and it's a shared passion. So, I dig it. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Well, take care of yourself, man.
All right, brother. You do the same. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye.
All right, man.